You never know when the revolution is going to happen. And the people who don't learn from it are the ones that fall off. It's the guys who immerse themselves in it that become the legends 30 years later.
Moments in music.
Welcome to Moments in Music, a podcast by Defected, hosted by myself, Monki, where we have our guests talk through the records that define them. Today, we welcome the legend Carl Craig to the podcast, a pioneering force in techno, known for pushing the boundaries of his unique blend of techno, jazz, and experimental sounds. Carl has played a key role in shaping the global dance music scene over the years, with decades of innovation and a deep mastery of rhythm and melody. We touch on the influence Detroit roller rinks had on him as a child.
And I didn't realize how influential it was to me until I started going to the soulscape parties.
When he first touched a synth.
And it was like, you feel the energy. This is my future.
And his first trip to Europe in the late 80s and much more. Please welcome to the podcast, Carl Craig. Carl, welcome to Moments in Music. It's lovely to have you here. How was your recording yesterday? A special set that you recorded. Tell us about it.
I was in a building down the street from here with these amazing light installation where it felt like I was playing inside of a waterfall. And it was just the crew and me. And, when you're in a situation like that, you either have to entertain the crew or entertain yourself.
Which one did you go for?
I had to entertain myself.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it is when you don't have people in front of you, giving you this type of energy, then you have to find that energy. So I found it within the waterfall, within the art, within being immersed in the building itself. And I had a good one. I was only going to play 60 and I played almost 90, so that's pretty good.
Okay, that's a sign of somebody that's enjoying themselves.
Yeah, it was like extra 30 seconds, extra 30 minutes rather. Sorry.
That must be quite like a new. I mean, it was kind of a new thing for everyone, I guess, and it mainly happened in lockdown. That idea of sort of playing to no one, but also playing to so many people online.
Lockdown helped everyone to kind of refine the style, but the way they were trying to do, I don't know if it was after 9/11 or if it was right around the change of millennia. I don't know if you remember, there were the concept that there would be these remote parties. Mm-hmm. So you have people that come into a room and then you have a screen with a DJ on it and he's in another party. Yeah. And you'd have two parties done at the same time. That's the first time that I really thought that was going to be the future of doing something like that. But we need the energy of the DJ in the room with the people, not the people feeling separated from the music in that way. But COVID definitely helped to revolutionize it, I guess.
And yes, you said that you played within like an art installation.
Yeah. And
it's something that you have done throughout your career, combining different types of art and genres and very experiential sort of situations. Mm-hmm. What has always drawn you to sort of very much think outside of the box, if you like?
I truly believe being a Gemini has either made me want to be completely creative as an artist, or if I was a politician, creatively evil as a politician, because all the most horrible politicians are Geminis.
Right, I didn't know that.
Oh yes. Boris Johnson, he was a Gemini.
Was he?
Gemini, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he
was
pretty awful. He is a Gemini, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're blaming it on your star sign?
Yeah, it's because we want to be creative.
Yeah.
No, from a kid, I've always been attracted to arty, bizarre things. I might not live it, in the sense of, living it through my clothes or living it through makeup or any of that kind of stuff. It's just like this strange thing that clicks in my head that what I do has to be for art's sake, not for, not for commercial reasons. So, so once I really found my calling with music and all that, made it possible for me to really look at things on an artistic level. Two of my main influences, Sun Ra and Miles Davis, are both Geminis, and they're both, out of this world in their concepts as musicians, as philosophers. The philosophy of the music that they do is still unparalleled. Nobody's beat anything that Miles Davis has done. And he's been dead for 30 years. Sun Ra's been dead for about the same, and there's nobody touching Sun Ra.
And you touched a little bit on your childhood there, always being sort of attracted to very like left field things. Describe what the child version of you was like growing up in Detroit, the way that you did in the era that you did.
Yeah, I was always getting on top of the roof of the garage and jumping off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing that kind of stuff and jumping on the fence, jumping from the fence to slam dunk. Because I was not tall enough to slam, not tall enough to even touch the rim. So that kind of stuff. Always in my sister's face. Yeah. Roller skating, riding BMX bikes.
Okay, so outdoorsy.
Don't put me in a box, please. No, I'm not outdoorsy.
Playing.
I was just playing. Yeah. Everything. I tried to find a game out of it. I was playing with everything. Yeah.
And when did the musical influence come in?
Of course, for my brother. I have an older brother, and he had a guitar, and I used to copy whatever he played. I would grab it and play it, and he was always the one that was always told me to be unique. He's the one that, but when you have an older brother, they're telling you that so you don't copy them. Leave me alone. Do your own thing. Be unique.
Yeah.
So that always kind of stuck in my head. And his thing was that he had a guitar, but he didn't want a bass, or he didn't want a guitar. He wanted a bass, so he would take 2 strings off,
right?
And then it's a bass, kind of thing. So that DIY thing is there, of course, from that influence. But my sister used to take me skating all the time, and I used to love skating, roller skating, not like, I guess you guys would call it disco skating or something.
When you're kind of like in a hall and there's like music being played. Okay.
Yeah, like the parties that Moody Man does, like Soulscape.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that had a big musical influence on you. What were, like, if you could take us back to that time, what things were you skating to? What were you hearing? And what were you thinking about when you were hearing these records in that environment?
Roller skating rinks followed the radio. So whatever was hot on the radio, you'd hear at the roller skating rink. And luckily, during that time, it was, funk music and electronic and stuff like that. So the two hottest records for a long time was this Italian record by Kano called I'm Ready, and this Japanese record by Yellow Magic Orchestra called Firecracker. Those are the two hot tracks. It was either Firecracker or Computer Games. It's kind of hard to say because it morphs in 3 tracks morph into one. And that was what we skated to, as well as Rick James, definitely, and Prince and Michael Jackson and all that. And things with skating was like with clubs too, because clubs, now when you go to clubs, you don't have, and I was talking to Jeff Mills about this the other day, the formula of clubs at the time was that there were either a certain amount of tracks or a certain amount of minutes of fast tracks that were played. And then you had to play slow songs.
Right.
And then you played fast songs again.
Yeah.
And the slow songs was for people who wanted to slow dance, but it was also to get the people off the dance floor to go buy drinks.
Right. Okay. Didn't know this. Yeah.
So the logic of music, how music was played and stuff was different, and probably closer to what was happening on the radio again, because they needed music to go into their commercials. They still do. There's probably still a formula of what song you play before a commercial comes on. And then you have 5 minutes of commercials, and then again another 15 minutes of music or something.
And how did that sort of like flow of music sort of affect how you sort of like listen to music? And
so like with roller skating, there was shoot the duck, so they play a certain song where everybody at a time, they say shoot the duck, and you get down on one foot and then you put another foot out.
Yeah.
And there was particular songs that were shoot the duck songs, and then there were slow songs, and they still do the slow song stuff. Maybe not at Kenny's party, maybe not at the Soulscape, but if you go on like a Sunday night, there's slow jam time, and they play the upbeat stuff and whatever. The only music that sounds strange to me at roller skating rinks now is when you hear like Lil Wayne or something.
Right.
It's like, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize this was a roller skating track.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess this roller skating experience as a kid that your sister took you to, correct me if I'm wrong, was kind of like your first sort of like communal experience of listening to music and experiencing music within like a big group of people.
Yeah, and we were fortunate. Like in New York, I always say, there's always a parade. Doesn't matter where in New York you're going to be. There's always going to be a parade somewhere. Detroit's not like that, so we don't have Dominican parade or Puerto Rican parade or Nigerian parade or whatever. The only parades that we have is Thanksgiving parade and maybe Martin Luther King walk or something. But we had what was called ethnic festivals, which were downtown in Hart Plaza, where Movement Festival is now. And these ethnic festivals every week would be a different culture. So Greek world or African world or Arabic pride or whatever they were doing. And that was really where I first was hearing music with crowds of people, with food, with all that stuff. And we were fortunate to have a Montreal Jazz Festival in Detroit. I think there were 3 outside of Montreal, Switzerland, which was Detroit, Atlanta, and Tokyo, I believe. Okay. And Montreal had a huge impact on me and on I would say most of my colleagues that grew up in Detroit, because when we did the Detroit Electronic Music Festival the first year, that was a big deal that we're standing on stage playing to Hart Plaza, where we would go all these years as being kids, and instead of looking at the stage, we're looking from the stage. Yeah, we're serenading the buildings and everything. It's great.
Yeah.
So those were amazing. The roller skating part was really important and influential, and I didn't realize how influential it was to me until I started going to the Soulscape parties. And it's like, oh yeah, because they were at Northland Roller Rink, which was where Soulscape had been for a few years, and that popped back into my brain. But another thing, and a lot of people in the U.S., especially in the Black community, is church, where it's the music and the large gathering of people. I grew up going to Lutheran church, which is like bastardized Catholicism. But my grandparents were preachers in the South, and my grandmother took me to a revival when I was probably 10 or 11 or something. And when I started going to raves, it was like, this is just a revival. This is exactly the same thing that my grandma took me to. You know, people in a big tent dancing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's just that you got an organ player instead of a DJ.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. Different kind of church.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, all these experiences you're telling about, you're talking to us about, one, it's amazing to hear that, you know, you went to back to a roller skating rink later in your life and then realised how much of an impact that had on you. That must have been sort of like a really lovely experience.
Yeah.
But let's also talk about sort of Detroit as a city and what impact that had on you growing up and your sort of path. Obviously, we're definitely going to get into the buildings of techno and that scene and Joanne Atkins and everything. But just as a city and growing up in that city, what sort of impact that had on you?
Detroit, growing up, was a very violent city. And the violence was a product of the drug trade, which was infesting all the United States, especially urban areas. But when before I was a teenager, how outside of the news, how you knew that Detroit had bad reputation is in some movies. They'll say, we're hiring a hitman. He's the best hitman. He's from Detroit. It's like, okay. All right. So we have that reputation. Yeah. Great. But by the time I was a teenager, there were drive-bys and all that kind of stuff. So for me to stay in the house playing my guitar, totally fine. Because, you know, I mean, I go out and we like I said, I used to jump off the roof and go down the street and play with Poopsie and Preston and Darrell, you know, Kenny. I had a friend across the street named Kenny, but yeah, at a certain time, because there was the street light rule, which when you're a kid, if the street light comes on, get your ass home.
Right. Okay.
You know? Otherwise, I'll hear my dad whistling. Or you hear somebody else's mom like, Daryl, you get in here. So, but, you know, as it became more violent, then the street light rule, you know, it's like, just stay your ass in the house. And staying in the house, yeah, I had my guitar. I had whatever little things I could make music with, and it really made it possible for me to focus and hone in more on what my job is now, you know, music.
So it was kind of treated as a welcome, like escapism, if you like.
Yeah, I had my TV.
Any TV.
I had my guitar. You know, yeah. And by that time too, I had in television. You know, you don't know what television is. In television, yeah, video games.
Video games.
Yeah.
And
early ones.
You were talking about, you know, you had your guitar, your brother was a massive influence on you as well. Yeah. When do you sort of remember first trying to create music, lay down something?
So we always had you know, tape recorders and stuff. So we had a little reel-to-reel when I was a kid, and I learned how to use that 5 years old, 6 years old or something. Yeah. You know, how to spool the reel on and stuff and record my voice, because it's a little microphone. And we had a little organ, like one of those, this guy from Australia is just coming out with this organ that is basically the same thing that we had in the house in the 70s,
right?
Except that it has an arpeggiator on it, and you know, I record the organ and stuff. So when it came to putting a recorder in front of my guitar amp, then I did it. But Poor People in the Hood, when cassettes came around, that's how we edited tape.
Right.
We made pause edit tapes, and honing my skill for recording came from, you have a turntable, you have the tape, and then you play a part, and then you press pause, go back to it, press pause again, and you just make this complete loop of whatever you wanted it to be. So if Rock Lobster, for instance, the B-52s was a hot track at the time. No, I'll use something like a Situation from Yazoo. That was a hot track, and everybody was pause taping Situation. Everybody was pause taping Situation. So, I just learned with what I had, and you find somebody who had something a little better. Like my uncle had a better sound system, and his son, one of his sons, used to do even better pause tapes. So,
Right.
And he's 4 years older than me, so of course I was looking up to him and watching what he was doing, and not looking at it as competition, but definitely as the way of learning. So.
And sort of having these conversations of different people, I've kind of learned that there was, in a sort of certain period of time of producer's life, there always kind of seems to be one person that introduces them to something really important, whether that be like a drum machine or a record or something. Do you have somebody that particularly comes to mind around that period of time?
Yeah, my cousin Doug, definitely. He was the first person that he's not the first person that I knew that made a record, but he's the family member that made a record. So the first person that I knew that made a record was Paul Leslie. He did a track called Charivari, which is a big like proto new wave pre-house disco record. That was huge in Detroit, and it's huge. It's a huge Detroit record. But my cousin made a track called Technicolor with Juan Atkins. And that was when I first touched the synthesizer.
Right.
And it was like, you feel the energy. This is my future.
It's radiating off it.
It's right, yeah. The energy is radiating from it. Yes, So yeah, that was really what gave me the bug, because I always loved the sound of synthesizers, but it was something that guitar was my thing. So I heard synths, and of course Parliament Funkadelic records, Rick James records, Michael Jackson, and Prince. But my goal was to be like Prince, because I was playing guitar. So for a long time, that was my focus, was guitar. And then once I touched a Prophet synthesizer, that was the prophecy.
Yeah, it's there in the name.
That was a prophecy, yeah.
And you sort of like, where did you go from there? That was your first experience of a synthesizer. You got hooked.
Yeah.
Where was the journey from there? Did you lean on your cousin a lot to sort of, understand the studio? And
Oh, I was always at his house bothering
bugging him.
Yeah, bugging him. At his parents' house, and they moved out. And when he moved out, he had even more synthesizers, and it was like, yeah, this is great. It was quite incredible. So yeah, and then of course, I met. There was a record store called Buy Right, and DJ Stingray, as you guys know him as now, used to work at Buy Right, and we would I'd be hanging out at Buy Right. I think he had made a record by that time too. NASA, I think was the name of it. He had done it with I think he did it with Mark Kenshin.
We had him on the pod not too long ago.
Yeah, I think he did it with Mark Kenshin and another guy named Louis. I can't remember what Louis' name is. And Stingray used to say, like, we have a thing in Detroit where, like, what do you think of Juan Atkins? What do you think of Derek May? What do you think of Kevin Saunderson? What do you think of Jeff Mills? I think Derek's better than Kevin. No, I think Kevin's better than Derek. And you just get into these kind of matches, almost like if you think your football team, Arsenal versus Manchester United or something. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But yeah, so he was the guy who said the 808's the future. And the 808 was already out of print by that time. Right. It was like 808's the future, and he was right. 808 is the future, still is the future. But he introduced me to Kevin Saunderson first, and then I met Derek May, and then I ended up working with Derek May. He was my mentor. So that's really when it got supercharged. I had already bought a synthesizer by that time, a Prophet. And I begged, borrowed, and stole whatever I needed to in order to make it happen. So I needed a 4-track. I borrowed a 4-track. I needed a drum machine. I borrowed a drum machine. And I just kind of put it all together and started making these demos. And then once I linked up with Derek and started working with him as Rhythm, I got here to London in 1989.
Okay. And you're talking about having to beg, borrow, and steal, and it was all analog back then. And there's so much now that's so available to our fingertips. And I think back then there was something. I mean, obviously I didn't live it, but it feels like there was something very magical about having to be very resourceful and being limited in what you have and making it work. In comparison to being in the studio now, I imagine it's so different.
What is studio now is the concept of studio now is different because, I don't even think we ever called our bedrooms the studio. It was just, we got some gear in the room, where now the studio is in your computer. You just have to have a good pair of headphones and a whole bunch of plugins, and you can even play notes on the computer keyboard. You don't even have to have a controller or a synthesizer or whatever. So I see what we were doing as studio or as making music as it was a journey. It was when we were at where Derek's studio was. Transmat was upstairs in the loft. Juan Atkins' studio was downstairs, which is Metroplex, and Kevin Saunderson's studio was next door, which is KMS. And we needed a 909, grabbed it from Kevin's studio. You needed a Juno 106, grabbed it from Juan's studio. You needed a memory Moog. Derek had a memory Moog upstairs, so everybody just kind of borrowed gear and it just rotated, and that's how we were making tracks. Somebody like Kevin would get a piece of gear that he couldn't figure out, but I'd get my hands on it and I could figure it out, the language of it a lot faster, and then I would show whoever needed to, or I'd be the guy who programmed it or something. So it was a lot of fun. It was definitely different than getting online and seeing a video of how to use something or how to figure out to EQ something or whatever. It was way it was more communal. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I like what we were doing was communal. And I'm sure in Chicago it was the same thing. Yeah. I'm sure in New York it was the same thing. Yeah. Actually in New York, I read something one of the Beastie Boys said that the 808 that they used on Peter Piper, not Peter Piper, what is it? Peter Piper's Run DMC. But the 808 that they used on License to Ill was the same 808 that was used on Run DMC, the same one that's used on LL Cool J, the same one that's used. So it's kind of the same scenario that, you know, oh, 808, we need it. Let's do it. Boom.
Yeah. And that word sort of communal, I'm sure when you guys were, or maybe you did, I don't know, you can tell me, when you guys were sharing drum machines and synthesizers and stuff in this very small space that went on to impact the world so globally, musically.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that really exists anymore, because obviously the internet is an amazing thing, and it's a way that people can share information a lot quicker, like you said. But that sort of idea of people being in a very small communal area and that going on to impact something much bigger than themselves, I feel like it's very rare, and it's an amazing sort of era to have been a part of. And you probably guys didn't even know, I mean, you didn't know what was going to happen, kind of thing, from there.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
No. You never know that when the revolution is going to happen. It just kind of happens. You're glad to be there at the time. You know, and you know, and the people who don't learn from it are the ones that fall off. You know, it's the guys who learn from it, and it's the guys who immerse themselves in it that become the legends 30 years later. You know, because there's a lot of people that make great music that fell off, and they didn't understand how to embrace the revolution.
What would you say was the thing that you learnt most from that revolution?
There were so many people making so many good records that it steps up the competition. You know, so you have to know how to learn how to make something good, and then also you got to have people around you that are not only encouraging, but people that'll dog you as well. And it's like with sports, you know, you can't tell the guy that, oh, that was a great shot. You know, when he misses a shot, you got to tell him that he sucks. And then, you know, maybe he doesn't want to get ridiculed so bad. And then he's going to, you know, and it's worse when it's coming from a teammate than when it's coming from a fan or when it's coming from a critic or something.
Because you have more respect. You have more respect for them.
You got respect for them, and you can kind of talk back to them and you know, start dogging each other, start fighting, whatever, but it could push your game up, you know. But another thing that was important for me was that I never had taken drugs. You know, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing anything that took the focus away from what I wanted to do, which was to make music and to, you know, I didn't even know about traveling as a DJ, because that was being created at that time, you know, when like maybe even DJ culture that we know was created by Derek May and Kevin Saunderson. You know, definitely remixing, how remixing is as we know it was developed by Kevin Saunderson. We Papa Girl rappers. That remix, nobody ever did any remix like that before. Before that, it was, you know, you turned up the drums and you extended the thing and put some effects on it. You know, Kevin just tore it apart, kept the vocals, put a new track on top. Nobody ever done that.
That was the first of its kind.
That was, as far as I know, that was the first time that anybody had ever done anything like that before.
Crazy.
Yeah. Actually, one of the We Papa Girl rappers just died. Yeah, I just read that today.
Sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Happens.
It does happen.
It does happen.
It does happen, yeah.
Yeah. There was another guy from here that was a friend a long time ago, John Saul Kane. He used to do Depth Charge. He just passed away too. So, you know, there's a lot of people that did some revolutionary stuff, and their numbers up.
Yeah. It must feel strange for that to be happening now.
Yeah, I watched that with with my dad, because he always had older friends, and you have somebody that passes away and stuff. But we're at that time, and when Larry Levan had passed away, or Frankie Knuckles had passed away, they were greats before, but they were like older than me.
Okay.
So now there's things that are within my world that's like, wow, damn, John Saul Kane, he was exactly the same age as me.
It's much closer to home.
It's really close to home.
Yeah.
But that's part of living. You don't live forever.
No.
But the music does live forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look up Depth Charge.
I will. The legacy, and the legacy that you're part of and you're still part of is, I don't know. I almost feel like it might have been overwhelming at times, or maybe you took it in your stride. I'm not sure.
Never overwhelming.
Yeah.
No, if I had pop success, that would be overwhelming. I was always just under the radar, and that's way better.
Yeah,
it's way better because you can still make a good living and have autonomy and just be not pressured. Because there's a saying, you're only as good as your next hit.
Yeah.
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 So that's a lot of pressure that can be put on somebody. And the history of, and I've been talking about this recently, the history of that is not from the pressure of putting out another hit to be famous, is the pressure of the record label to get paid from the last hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way distribution was at the time when it was run by Mobsters, that if you sold 1 million copies, great. But sell another 1 million copies of another record and you'll get paid for that last 1 million copies.
Right.
So it was live or die,
Also, distribution was run by Mobsters.
It was run by Mobsters, yes.
Please tell me more about that.
I mean, the music industry was run by Mobsters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no secret. Just like casinos were run by Mobsters. It just kind of went hand in hand. But I don't know how it started. I think it started with filling up jukeboxes. Because any business that you could use coins in was potentially untraceable.
Right.
So jukeboxes, gaming machines like pinballs and all that kind of stuff were like cash that nobody would see because you never had to declare it. Through the jukeboxes, it was how you got the music into the jukeboxes.
Right.
So there was a game, underworld game that was played with that. And then you had Radio Payola, and a lot of the Radio Payola was controlled by promoters who were affiliated with Mobsters. And there was an interesting story from, I can't remember what the book was, but it was about a guy who ran CBS Records in the U.S. and he was promoting, I think they had Pink Floyd. Yeah, it was during The Wall, when The Wall came out. And they decided to use their own promotion team at CBS to promote the album. There was a show in L.A. at a big arena. No sales were being done. They couldn't sell a ticket because they couldn't get any radio airplay in L.A. And the management for Pink Floyd was like, you got to get this guy to do this, because they were like, no, we're not paying any independent guys. You got to get this guy to do this. He's going to make it happen. They finally said yes. The guy's in New Jersey.
Yeah.
They told him at 9 a.m, and by 12 noon, the radio was playing The Wall back to back.
Right. Okay.
and they were able to do well on ticket sales, I guess, in such a short amount of time. So the power of the music industry is way different. Like how by me being under the wire with you know, how Derek and Kevin and Juan and everybody dealt with things, and then also by us being able to come to the UK and to Europe to sell our music, it took us out of that world.
Yeah.
You know, and it brought us into another world that we could flourish in, and that world of music appreciation that wasn't controlled in the same way, you know. So we weren't trying to sell 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 of records. We were just trying to sell enough to press the records and repress the records and have fun doing it.
Yeah. And you said that you came over to Europe for the first time in the late 80s?
89.
How was that experience for you to come over here and experience the music in a different environment, I guess?
It was incredible. I mean, I was listening to Frankie Goes to Hollywood and, you know, Human League and Yazoo and you know, they had big records on the radio in Detroit. One of my favorites, Visage Frequency 7, that was like a big deal for me. So to come over and to be in you know, the mecca of electronic music of the time, you know, where every song that was coming out was an electronic song, that was a big deal. So when I got here, my girl that I was seeing at the time, she was married at one time to Glenn Gregory from Heaven 17. And I don't think I knew that, but when I met Glenn, it was like, oh my God, you know, Heaven 17, you know. And she introduced me to another one of my great friends and mentors, Mark Moore from S Express, who I met the first day that I got off the plane. Baby Ford met the first day I got off the plane. I saw a guy called Gerald again. I met him in Detroit, but he was first day I got off the plane, saw Gerald, and it was like it was written in stars. Yeah, definitely written in stars that I'm doing what I'm doing now because, you know, I landed that day at that time in London.
All goes back to feeling the profit. Exactly. And what was your first experience of like rave culture over here, and how was it different to the US at the time?
So I was here during the poll tax riots.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the aftermath and all that. So the same time the big raves were happening, and I'm not sure within the amount of months or whatever, the anti-rave bill, where if you have more than two people in the car after a certain amount of time, a certain time of night, that's considered that you were going to a rave. Yeah. So if you have four people in the car, you're getting pulled over by the cops. Yeah. You know, that kind of stuff. So I was here during that time, and it was real crazy, the rules that were happening. I didn't get to a rave in the early days, you know, in the days where promoters were flying in on choppers and stuff. They might have even had Carl Cox coming in on a chopper to play the gigs. Probably. Yeah, which is like another level, you know, from where we even come from Detroit. You know, but it's incredible being here at the time, and that kind of stuff was happening. Of course, I was going to Heaven. Shoom was happening at the time, and then I was here, but I didn't end up making it for Tony Humphrey's debut at Ministry of Sound. But you know, after that, I was at Ministry all the time, so I wasn't there for the first day, the New Year's opening, but definitely after that, and then playing at Ministry of Sound and stuff. So I might have had a bit more experience with warehouse culture here than I did with rave culture that was happening out in the farms and
Fields.
stuff. Yeah.
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 And warehouse culture here is obviously big, but also massive in Detroit as well, industrial city.
Sure.
What were the sort of the similarities or the differences, or what did you take from warehouse culture here back to the US, or sort of from the US to here when you played?
You know, I've always preferred clubs though.
Yeah.
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 Why?
I've always preferred clubs because clubs, I think you have a bit more of an intimate experience than a warehouse.
Yeah.
Warehouses are great. You know, sometimes when you play at an event with 3,000 people and they're cheering to your music, it's a real ego trip.
Yeah.
You know, when you're playing at a club where people are really dancing, then you really see how the response of the music is. You know,
Yeah.
and how people react to what you do.
Yeah. I said this I played a really small club in Philadelphia a few weeks ago.
Okay.
But we'd obviously just come off the back of the summer, and a lot of the shows are quite big, and Ibiza and stuff like that, and those things are amazing. But I said to my friend, it was really small, 100 people.
Oh.
And I was like, you know what, sometimes the smallest ones give you the most life.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I hadn't done one of those shows in a while, and I was just like, this was the beginning of why I started to love this. And I think, playing small shows is a reminder of like what it's all about.
Yeah, because you know you can share your tequila with them.
Yeah,
each and every person, you can give them a little pour of tequila.
Yeah.
And you can high five or
you
know, whatever. It's nice to have that relationship with the people. That feels like we can all, you know, be friends in some cases, you know. But also with clubs, you can really get like if you clear a dance floor of 100 people versus you clear a dance floor of 3,000 people, I mean, it's totally different.
Yeah.
You know, clearing the floor of 100 people is one thing. Clearing a whole warehouse is exodus.
Yeah. You're like, oh shit.
That's an exodus. You know, it's like, oh my God, Moses must have came and everyone followed him.
Yeah.
Parted the Red Sea. So I mean, this whole club life thing, this whole DJ life thing is an incredible adventure that I don't take for granted, and I get upset when other people take it for granted. You know, and mostly I get upset about it when people who don't understand. They discredit, you know, what we do. You know, they discredit it as being same thing as back in the day where it's like, oh, you're just playing other people's music or something, right. You know. And it's like, no, you look at Moody Man, and it's not just him playing other people's music. He's putting that music together in a way that you'll only hear Moody Man put it together.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part. That's really important.
Yeah. It's an expression of the person who's
definitely
and obviously everybody's different, so it's all going to come out differently.
Yeah.
And how was that transition for you from producer to DJ? Was it something that you thought about that would just happen naturally, or it's just something that happened with the culture?
So my first experience DJing was at a family reunion, and it was both pro and con because the guys who were playing, they were this like kind of tag team DJ guys in the South that were playing you know, like Stax record stuff, you know. So we were from Detroit, all down there. We weren't really interested in that sound. We liked Egyptian Lover. So I had records that I always brought with me to listen to because I was 14 years old or something. And wasn't even thinking, like I had touched turntables and I tried to scratch and all that, but you know, I wasn't good at it. And I said, I didn't say anything, actually. I just had my records. And my cousin's husband went over to the DJs and was like, yeah, he's got some records. Why don't you let him play a record? And they said, okay, yeah, we'll get a young buck a chance. So I came over and I put on Egyptian Lover, Egypt, Egypt. And everybody went crazy, went nuts.
Yeah.
And they looked at me like, who the heck is this kid? And I said, can I put on another one? And they said, yeah. So I put on the next one. I tried the mix. And it was shoes in the dryer, galloping. And I went from hero to zero.
Real fast.
Real fast. But that's a great learning experience. And I talk about it all the time because I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that experience. If I only played that one record and said, I'm going to quit, do anything, my ego would have been so out of this world that the next time I played and crashed and burned, I would have probably said, okay, I'm going to become a postman. Yeah. And I'm not doing this anymore. So we have to have those, you have to have those moments where you learn a hard lesson. Yeah. And that was a hard lesson that I really treasure.
Yeah. Did you think about that moment, the sort of first time you did like a gig, like a gig to fans or no?
No, because by the time I started DJing again, I was still engulfed in DJ and guitar stuff, but I was producing records and what I would play had more to do with what I produced and what I re-edited. So I even had a reel-to-reel tape machine that I would take on gigs because I saw Derek May using reel-to-reel. I saw Mike Dunn playing in Chicago with reel-to-reel and cassettes and stuff. So I'm like, I'll make my own edits. And I would travel to Amsterdam and, have tracks that nobody heard before or re-edits that nobody heard before. And that made it fun. Yeah. That was the fun part, right. I guess for a lot of London DJs with vinyl culture, like when JP's store, what is JP's vinyl? I forgot what his store was called, but he was selling, like bootleg edits and stuff. And, he'd have like 2 copies. And you go and get 1 copy, and the only guy in London with a copy, and your whole set would be based off of that. I took mine a couple of steps further and was just my own stuff, my own re-edit, or I resample stuff and just, make these really interesting adventures.
Yeah. You've mentioned many records sort of like naturally. Yeah. But just to sort of like wrap things up, could you choose a record for us, one of your own maybe, that sort of reminds you of a pivotal moment through your life and sort of why that record represents that moment?
A pivotal record. At Less is I had a girlfriend named Leslie at the time that I was living with. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called At Less. I did it at Leslie's house. And she lived on the 9th floor of a building that overlooked the Detroit River. And you could also see Canada because the river is maybe half a mile long or something, or half a mile wide, so you can see Canada on the other side. And my gear was set up in front of the window, and I used to watch everything that was happening. It was like looking at a movie because the windows were floor to ceiling. And in Detroit we had these arsons that were happening, and I remember one time I was composing while watching these warehouses on the river on fire, and that was pretty incredible. Also, I could see from the like at night you'd see helicopters with searchlights. And I don't know if they were looking for stalled boats or people trying to swim across the border, or I don't know what it was, but it was very 80s sci-fi,
Right.
like watching Running Man or Escape from New York or something.
Yeah.
So I've composed in a lot of places. I've composed on a girlfriend's floor here in London. I've composed in my parents' basement, but that's probably the most impactful view that I had while writing music. And I've actually thought about getting an apartment in that building just so that I could go back to doing that kind of composition and stuff. But no, I haven't done it.
It sounds almost like cinematic, like a live movie you were
Yeah.
composing to.
Yes, it definitely was. Because when Derek May and I used to sit on the floor of his loft surrounded by synthesizers and drum machines, we would talk about Blade Runner and the Vangelis soundtrack and all that. And even at that loft, because one whole wall was windows, you could see we have steam that comes from underground, and see cars driving through the steam and stuff, and it's got a real amazing visual element to it, but you had to stand up and look out the window in comparison to just sitting there with gear looking out of these big windows. It's amazing.
So would you go far as to say that those sort of visual textures like came out in the music that you made
Definitely.
during that time as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because when you're using your imagination versus your actual what you're seeing, so like if you want to make music about war, you can be in the studio making music about war, or you can be composing while you're watching it happen. So I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I would think that a bomb is going to explode right in front of me while I'm composing, but I can imagine that what would come from that could be incredible.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure just to hear your stories and your experiences, and probably best dressed guest we've ever had on the show.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Have fun at your shows this weekend. I look forward to seeing the set go live as well, and hopefully, I'll participate again.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Moments in music.